Good afternoon. I'm Robert White, council member at large and chair of the Committee on Housing. Today is Thursday, May 9th, 2024. The time is now 3:50 p.m. I'm calling to order this additional meeting of the committee to review the report and recommendations of the Committee on Housing on the fiscal year 2025 budget for agencies under its purview. I recognize we have a quorum consisting of myself and Ward 5 Councilmember Zachary Parker, Ward 2 Councilmember Brooke Pinto, and Ward 3 Councilmember Matt Fruman, who has a birthday today. So happy birthday, Matt Fruman. Each year, the council coordinates an extensive oversight process. First, we review how agencies in our committees have been doing and hear from constituents about their experiences with government programs. Second, the mayor shares her ideas for what she thinks should be in the next budget, in the budget next year. And the council takes a close look to see whether we agree with her ideas or want to make changes. Constituents play a big role during this part by sharing what they found in the proposal and giving recommended changes. After assessing and incorporating feedback, committees write up their funding decisions and then vote on those decisions before sending recommendations to the full council for a vote on the entire budget. Today, we're at the stage where the committee talks through and votes on its recommendations to the full council. All council members and staff should have received draft copies of the committee's materials yesterday for today's discussion. This has been a year unlike any other. Leading up to the mayor's budget release, we heard that things were going to be bad. Less money was coming in, and that meant we would probably see cuts to programs that provide real support for people. A lot of those supports fall under this committee's watch. The agencies we oversee deal with both housing and human service needs, like money for food and rent and legal help for people facing eviction. Once we got the budget, it was good to see some gains. It had slightly more money for first-time homebuyers, and it had capital money set aside to finally redevelop and update one of the largest homeless shelters in the country. But what I noticed immediately about the proposal was loss of opportunity, loss of stability, and loss of hope. My office hears from people daily who are trying to lead better lives, but are stuck because they're one paycheck away from losing the roof over their head. People call us because they've tried calling agencies over and over and either don't get an answer or are met with disrespectful responses. The thing is, this isn't new. A lot of the problems people shared this year are not new, and that in itself is the problem. The district's budget continues to grow every year, including this year, but people don't feel the results. Some of that is external. There's no doubt that communities are still digging their way out of COVID losses. But we get asked all the time, where is the money going? It's a fair question and one I focused on this year. When we look at the data on how homelessness is increasing in the district and hear from residents who are forced to rely more and more on public benefits to keep their homes, the spending doesn't add up. DHS says they can't be held responsible for the affordable housing crisis, which means other agencies like DHCD and DCHA must fill the gap. And this isn't theoretical. We're seeing this happen in real time with real people's lives. Last month, DHS told thousands of families in the rapid rehousing program they would lose all assistance with their rent. This means thousands of parents who just got out of homelessness, who we know don't have the income to pay their rent, are faced with the trauma of maybe being homeless again. And this was predictable. Everyone knows these families can't afford the rent. Instead of planning ahead with other housing or with opportunities for wealth building, the mayor planned for their evictions and defunded almost every other program supporting keeping low-income families in their homes. Instead, the mayor proposed putting millions of dollars for only 1 year into a new truancy program for kids not going to school. She put that money in DHS specifically because housing instability and food insecurity cause truancy. So we have a budget that burns cash on a short-term truancy program today while directly and predictably causing more truancy in the same budget. This doesn't make sense, and people know it. Their kids feel it, and the cycle continues. Therefore, this committee, in partnership with the literally hundreds of residents who showed up to share ideas, had a big job to do to make up for these losses, and we needed to be organized and focused to do it. I asked each agency to come to our hearing with 3 goals that were specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Agencies cover a lot of ground and try to serve a lot of people. Without focused objectives, it is impossible to track progress on any of that work. These goals will help make sure the money we're spending actually helps people. Based on agency goals, constituent feedback, and our own review, the committee chose a series of investments that will prevent homelessness, restore and promote stability for residents, preserve existing housing, protect tenants, and support a more responsive government. To prevent homelessness, the committee's proposal reinstates money for the ERAP the ERAP and money for the domestic violence survivor supports, with help from Councilmember Henderson and her committee on health. With the help of Councilmember Nadeau's Committee on Public Works and Operations, the committee found over 140 permanent housing vouchers for various communities, including families being kicked out of the rapid rehousing program and LGBTQ residents. The committee also rejected several proposed legislative changes that would have rolled back opportunities for families experiencing homelessness. To restore and promote stability, the committee added funding to the employer-assisted housing for first responders and the home purchase assistance program for first-time homebuyers, with support from the Committee on Business and Economic Development, which Councilmember McDuffie chairs. And we sent money once again to support Safe Shores with children affected by abuse. In addition to funding, we drafted legislation to improve the efficiency and transparency of HPAP, which we have heard many concerns about this past year, and incorporated legislative language from Councilmember Allen that gives 911 callers access to additional homebuyer 911 call takers access to additional homebuyer assistance. For the 46 owners of River East at Grandview condos who lost their homes in 2021 due to faulty construction, the committee solidified a support package and included its terms in permanent mandatory legislative language. The committee also funded more outreach services to people staying on the street to support their journeys to stability through personal connection and case management. To preserve housing opportunities, the committee added funding to the Housing Preservation Fund that can support maintenance, repairs, and other short-term development needs. The committee similarly dedicated more rehabilitation and maintenance money to DCHA to make sure public housing residents can live in safe, dignified homes, and to ensure people have the support they need on their homeownership journeys, including preventing foreclosures. The committee restored some of the cuts to housing counseling services to assist people with home ownership and to prevent foreclosures. The committee also accepted money from Councilmember Bonds and the Committee on Executive Administration and Labor to fund legislation supporting residents in limited equity cooperatives. To protect tenants, the committee funded an additional attorney at the Office of the Tenant Advocate and OTA's annual Tenant Summit, a critical gathering where tenants can connect and receive Know Your Rights information. The committee also added more money to the Emergency Housing Assistance Program for tenants displaced in emergency situations. And lastly, to create a more responsive government, the committee funded several administrative supports to the Office of the ANC, the DC Housing Authority, OTA, and DHCD, meant to improve customer service and foster more positive and supported work environments for staff. For ANCs, the committee further included legislative language to make it easier for ANCs to do their jobs and support their communities. The drastic cuts in funding for our lowest income residents were too severe for this committee to address alone at this stage, but we have made progress by focusing on key priorities. Over the last month or so, we have produced a budget that invests in ensuring our families both remain stable today and have opportunities to buy homes and grow their incomes in the district tomorrow. We have tried to provide hope instead of causing harm, and we did these things while also preparing a more responsible, balanced budget than what was presented to us a few weeks ago. Over the next few weeks, my team will be working to take this same approach to advancing efficiency and effectiveness in all government programs as the council moves toward a vote on the full budget. Before I open the floor to discussion on the report, I want to acknowledge the members of this committee, Council Members McDuffie, Pinto, Parker, and Fruman, and your staff. It takes a village to get to this point, and working through this together has led to a much better outcome than we started with. Thank you for your engagement, thoughtful questions, and support. And thank you in particular to Councilmember McDuffie for the substantial funding you provided to invest in home ownership, particularly for our first responders. It will make a difference. I also want to highlight that my staff circulated an updated version of our report earlier today. There was one substantive change to the budget as a transfer from the Committee on Executive Administration and Labor didn't end up working out, so we removed $240,000 from our budget proposal. There were also editorial changes to the language in the report, and we added additional charts for extra transparency. With that, is there any discussion on the report and recommendations of the Committee on Housing on the fiscal year 2025 budget for agencies under its purview? Councilmember Fruman.
Thank you very much, Chairman White. This is a really difficult budget, and there are a lot of things out there that we all wish could have been funded that weren't funded. It calls out for a pound of cure, but what I think we're seeing here, and I think it's necessary and the right call, is an ounce of prevention. And so I applaud you for what you've been able to do here, increasing the funding for ERAP, one of those preventive measures, the Housing Preservation Fund, another key important thing. I think adding staff at DCHA to help people deal with issues, again, a really important investment. The litigation attorney at OTA, again, a thing that can help us in all different kinds of ways. The homeless prevention services for families, again, very important investment in order to keep our families housed. So I applaud you for everything that you've done in this budget. I'm sure I wish we could do more. I'm sure you wish we could do more, but I think you and your staff have done a great job of working with what we have to get to the best result possible. And I look forward to supporting this.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Fruman. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Councilmember White. I want to thank you and your team for putting together a very difficult budget in a challenging fiscal year. Our housing and human service agencies are on the front lines of serving our most vulnerable residents. And today I want to celebrate some of the gaps that we have been able to close. I'll begin by thanking you again, Councilmember White, for honoring the request to fund housing vouchers for LGBTQIA plus residents designated by the Office of LGBTQ Affairs, and to restore funds for emergency rental assistance, a critical program that once again was underfunded in the mayor's proposed budget. A few other items stand out. I'm thrilled that we are enhancing support for domestic violence victims, extending homelessness prevention services, and expanding permanent supportive housing vouchers. Housing is a right, and this committee is treating it as such, and I'm proud of that. I'm also proud that we're expanding legal services for district residents by providing funding for a litigation staff attorney at the Office of the Tenant Advocate, an office that does incredible work with a very slim budget. I also appreciate and agree with many of the policy recommendations in the report, which highlight concrete steps that DHCD, DCHA, and other agencies can take to improve their performance. I frankly do not believe that district residents are getting the value that they deserve of the hundreds of millions of dollars we are spending on housing, and some of the recommendations you've made will help us improve in those areas. Specifically, I will be keeping an eye on DHCD's delivery of rent control units and the rent control database that we hope will be presented by this fall. It is worth noting we've been waiting years for that database. Better management of the home purchase assistance program, which has at times abandoned participants in the program due to poor planning and execution. DCHA's resolution of deficiencies identified by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, DCHA's returning units to a state of good repair and continuing to clear its wait list, that wait list that we've been waiting for a very long time to open. Improvement of DCHA's customer service. DCHA and DHS should partner on efforts to improve DC's housing voucher programs, including recommendations identified by the lab at DC. DHS should work with DCHA to prioritize families exiting rapid rehousing for participation in the local rent supplement program. Finally, while I'm proud of the adjustments this committee is making to the mayor's budget, the reality is that we were not able to go far enough with the resources available to this committee alone. First, I am concerned that the mayor is forcing the council to choose in some respects between very important and vital programs. The truth of the matter is that homelessness is strongly correlated with truancy, and for understandable reasons, housing instability is extremely traumatic for any family or student to encounter, and it interferes with routines like attending school. I have introduced legislation to expand DHS's role in truancy reduction, and I believe we need to take a both and approach rather either or approach. Second, I am concerned that even with the adjustments to housing and human service agencies that the committee is making, we will not come close to meeting the needs of our most vulnerable residents. I look forward to working with my council colleagues to identify even more resources to meet those needs as we advance to the committee of the whole. But I think for the time we've had, the budget that we had within this committee, we have a lot to be proud of. And again, thank you, Councilmember White, for leading the charge.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Pinto.
Great. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Chairman White, to you and your entire team for all of the hard work that went into this committee report. This year's proposed budget saw significant cuts to critical housing programs and services, and I'm proud that this committee makes investments to fill many of these gaps, particularly in the areas of homelessness prevention, home purchase assistance, targeted supports for seniors, survivors of domestic violence, LGBTQIA+ residents, and returning citizens, as well as for public housing. This budget makes investments to support our advisory neighborhood commissioners and includes funding to address our truancy crisis. The mayor's proposed budget includes funding for non-congregate bridge housing for people experiencing homelessness, including at the Aston and Ward 2. I'm grateful to the executive for its engagement with stakeholders in the surrounding community through the group that we worked together to establish, the Aston Community Advisory Team. I second the committee's recommendations that DHS use existing capital funds to address the Aston's roof repair needs before any leaks occur. The committee invested an additional $6.9 million in the emergency rental housing program for a total of $26.9 million. And I hope that we can continue to work with colleagues to find additional funding for this crucial program. The committee adds $2 million for street outreach, which I think is vitally important to helping move our unhoused neighbors into permanent and stable housing. The committee invests in vouchers for permanent supportive housing and support for families in rapid rehousing. And I'm grateful for DHS's work to match and lease up existing vouchers. However, without any new vouchers for FY25, residents who become newly homeless starting this fall will have no permanent supportive housing options available. While I know that these investments fall short of the tremendous need that our community faces, the committee's $1.2 million in new PSH vouchers for individuals and $2.6 million for families is critically important, and I'm very appreciative. Additionally, I support the committee's recommendation to strike the rapid rehousing subtitle that could have risked prematurely exiting families from this important program. I appreciate the $3 million recurring investment in home purchase assistance for low and moderate income families and for our first responders. Through this budget, the committee targets services and housing assistance to some of our most vulnerable residents. The committee funds $500,000 to support survivors of domestic violence. Domestic violence is a leading cause of homelessness, particularly among women and members of the LGBTQIA+ community. Survivors need care that is responsive to the full range of their needs, which may include trauma-informed care and heightened confidentiality. The committee also funds 20 vouchers dedicated for members of the LGBTQIA+ community and invests in a shallow subsidy to allow low-income seniors to age in place, which is vitally important. I also appreciate the committee's continued focus on meeting the housing, transportation, and employment needs of our returning citizens. I look forward to working with the committee to ensure effective delivery of these programs and that more information can start earlier when people are still serving their sentence to make sure that the connectivity is as effective as possible. I'm grateful for the committee's work to provide dedicated funding for rehabilitation and maintenance of our public housing, and to provide ongoing oversight over the housing authorities' work to implement recommendations that were outlined in the 2022 HUD report. We have to stay focused on improvements there. Our ANCs work tirelessly to represent district residents and serve as valued partners to me and my office, and I know other council offices and communities across the city. This committee makes important investments to support their work, including restoring cuts to technical assistance and support. Finally, before I close, I want to speak briefly to our investments in truancy. I appreciate the challenges and nearly impossible decisions that this budget presents in this space. The committee's budget has reduced some funding allocated to DHS for a new truancy program. I recognize that the investments that the committee does make in stable and secure housing for families can help to ultimately prevent truancy. Unfortunately, though, these reductions are coupled with cuts in the mayor's proposed budget to truancy programs at the Office of Attorney General, at the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants, and the Judiciary Committee was unable to completely restore those cuts in also knowing that there was expansion in DHS. And so this scenario leaves us far short of the investments needed to properly address our truancy crisis and get our students back in the classroom. So I'm committed to working with you, Chairman White, and our colleagues council-wide to make additional investments in this budget to both prevent chronic absenteeism and to address truancy more effectively. So thank you again, Chairman, to you and your team. I also want to thank my team for all of your diligence in this budget, and I look forward to voting in support of the committee report today.
Thank you so much, colleagues. At this time, I move the report and recommendations of the Committee on Housing on the fiscal year 2025 budget with leave for staff to make technical and conforming changes. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, please indicate by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it and the motion passes. Thank you. Before we close, I want to thank the people who made sure we could get to this point. Every year, we take this opportunity to recognize some of the people who do so much for our city. And every year, I grow more appreciative for the support of an incredible, committed team. Few residents understand the long hours, high pressure, and high stakes that our staff in this building face every day that they come to work. Of course, I want to thank my own staff for working hard on this report. My committee director, Sean Hilgendorf, Deputy Committee Director, Sean Cuddihigh, Senior Legislative Counsel, Caitlin Kauchalova, and Legislative Counsel, Francesca Bryce. People don't see the work and would never know, but these folks frequently work well past midnight and often until the sun comes up. I don't say this as a badge of honor, but as an indication of commitment to making government work for people. I want to thank Jen Budoff, our budget director. Jen's steady leadership, insightful advice, and incredible management of a very strong budget team makes the work of every council member better and the council as a whole a stronger institution. Next, I have to recognize Joe Wolf, our budget analyst. Joe was extraordinary this year, digging into the details of Housing Authority financial accounts and spend plans to identify where we were off track and where we had extra to invest. His quick and proactive work constantly gave us options when it looked like there were none. And Joe does it all while being consistently accessible, supportive, and calm under pressure, even when faced with incredible challenges. I could not thank anyone without thanking Ann Phelps, our budget counsel and chief of staff of the budget office, and manages to both keep us all in line and make sure everyone who works here feels supported at the same time. Anne is an absolute joy to work with, and I learn from her every single year. In our general counsel's office, I would like to specifically thank Nicole Streeter, our general counsel, for her leadership and the consistently high quality professional work of her entire team, and Valerie Nadal, the committee's assistant general counsel, whose thoughtful edits and comments, cheerful support, and helpful recommendations improve every law this committee writes or reviews. From the CFO's office, I want to thank Jamie Lantanen, the fiscal analyst assigned to our committee. Jamie has always been responsive, decisive, and pleasant in his work with us, even with a long list of legislation for review. We look forward to every one of his emails and phone calls because he is consistently honest, diligent, and supportive. His partnership and calming demeanor is so appreciated in times of significant work like this. And I also would like to thank Basil Ficina and Bob McKeon for their thoughtful and diligent collaboration to make sure the tax relief granted to the River East owners in particular was accurate and met our intent. Finally, if anyone listening wants to learn more and get involved in our work, please sign up for our newsletter at robertwhiteatlarge.com. With that, the business before this committee is concluded. The time is now 4:16 p.m. and this additional meeting is adjourned.